Hello, welcome back to our last look at what papers will be bringing us on Saturday morning. Joining us again are the author and journalist Emma Wolfe and the columnist Ali Muraj, who writes for the article. Now, let's bring you up to date with the front pages. We've got a bit more, a few more front pages than we had at 10:30. That's often the case, particularly at the weekend. We'll start with the Times, though, which Russia gives its strongest indication yet that it will scale back its military ambitions in Ukraine, focusing on fighting for control of the east. The headline is Russia is retreating to eastern Ukraine. The FT leads on the similar story, a slightly more straight rendering of it than the Times in its headline, but it quotes a high-ranking official in the Russian army saying the special operation in Ukraine is now entering a new phase designed to fully liberate the eastern Donbass region. The Guardian says authorities in Mariupol estimate that as many as 300 people were killed when a theatre was bombed last week, the deadliest single attack known since Moscow began its invasion of Ukraine just over a month ago. The Mirror says the Prime Minister is supporting the growing number of calls for the P&O boss Peter Hepplethwaite to quit over the illegal sacking of 800 workers a week ago. According to the Yorkshire Post, the soaring cost of living is set to deepen the crisis facing the retail and in particular the hospitality sectors. Consumers are shunning spending and trying to keep up the cost of living instead. In an exclusive interview with the Daily Mail, the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, a former Justice Secretary, unveils plans to give, forgive me, not a former Justice Secretary, the current Justice Secretary, unveils plans to give free speech, legal supremacy over all other rights to stop debate from being eroded. What the paper calls a major victory over cancel culture. Interesting, that one, Emma and Ali, because there's a bit of cancel culture propaganda from President Putin. Apparently he's accusing the West of trying to cancel J.K. Rowling and now cancelling Russia too. Ali, do you want to kick us off this time? We start with the very grim news out of Ukraine. This suggestion from the authorities in Mariupol that as many as 300 people died when that theatre they were sheltering in the kind of the lower part of the theatre was destroyed by some kind of bombardment, although the Russians insist they're not targeting civilians.
Of course, it's absolutely appalling what happened in Mariupol. That is apparently the worst single attack that's happened so far during this war campaign that Russia started on February the 24th. And just on your point, Sean, about cancel culture and J.K. Rowling, I mean, J.K. Rowling didn't go and invade a country. So it's completely different here. President Putin saying that the West is trying to cancel Russia. Look, this is the UN now saying that this has got to be investigated. There's a lot of talk about war crimes. And in such situations, you have to go and assemble as much evidence as you can. The reality is bringing President Putin, once hopefully this war ends and we hope it's swift, to The Hague, to the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague is going to be nigh on impossible. I can never see Russia agreeing to cooperate with such an investigation. But you can see the horrific consequences of bombardment, innocents killed in the crossfire, and all norms of what you would expect, Geneva Conventions, all being transgressed in the pursuit of this war.
Yeah, and brilliantly summed up, actually, in the photograph. I mean, eerily. I can only call it an eerie photograph on the front of the Independent, Emma, which shows some burnt-out buses and a building that's kind of been, is still standing, but it's. I mean, you can see the burn marks on the outside and the way that the concrete has been scalded by the heat of the bombardments and the firestorm that's descended upon it. I mean, it's kind of a dystopian vision of cities, isn't it? It could be any city. It could be Bristol, it could be Glasgow, it could be Paris, it could be anywhere. And that's a salutary reminder in itself that this is it is literally in the heart of Europe. And mind your definition of EU or Western Europe or Eastern Europe, if you want to mark Central Europe on a map, you'll find yourself in Ukraine because it's such an enormous country.
Exactly. There's been some stunningly, shocking, but stunning photography, hasn't there, in the last month of just scenes of absolute devastation. Obviously, we all remember the picture of the heavily pregnant woman outside the maternity hospital, that shopping mall last weekend that has been razed to the ground. And I think it was a priest or a chaplain just walking amongst the rubble and the devastation. As you say, the photograph on the front of the Independent and the sort of scorch marks on the side of the bus and all of that. Absolutely terrible. And what the Independent are reporting is that they've found the UN Human Rights Commission have found, or a human rights team have found evidence of mass graves with up to 200 people buried in one of the graves. And especially Mariupol has been in the eye of the storm, because it's that crucial contested region. It stands in the way of Russia's securing a land corridor between Crimea and the eastern Donbass region. So Mariupol have taken the brunt of it. And as Ali was talking about there, the 300, probably up to 300 killed in that theatre attack last week. It just, the horror just goes on and on and on. And one can only hope that the potential retreat of the Russians may give some relief to the rest of the country.
It's fair to say, isn't it? It's interesting what Ali was saying about Russia giving up Putin. But I mean, it's slightly awkward for the West in the sense that the Americans don't even recognise the International Criminal Court, because they've always feared that American troops and so on might find themselves pulled before the court. I mean, it's a real. I don't want to use I won't use the phrase I was going to use because it could appear in poor taste. But it is, let's say, a very difficult environment to operate in when you're talking about international law. Telegraph, Emma, Russians prepare to scale back invasion. We talked a bit about this in the first part. The Times calls it effectively a retreat. I mean, at the very least, you can say it is not going to plan.
It is not going to plan, and the Russian sort of, aspiration or expectation, rather, that they would simply take over Ukraine. And you remember Putin, for 3-4 weeks ago, saying that, Russia and Ukraine are one people and that he wanted to take over the entire country. They're now kind of claiming, sort of rewriting history a little bit and claiming that actually their plan originally was to fully liberate the eastern Donbass region, and that they're now focusing on liberation. This is a senior military official who is a colonel general, who has been saying that actually that they're going to scale back the attack on other parts of the country. And so we wait and see whether that's a reality. Zelensky, understandably, is very sceptical, as are, the rest of us allies. And we'll see. But, may this be the beginning of the end for the rest of Ukraine? I'm not quite sure how you're meant to feel if you're in the Donbass region at this news.
No, exactly. I mean, just looking at the figures on it, forgive me, my eyesight is not as good as it should be, particularly this time. I knew I should have put my glasses on. 93% of the Luhansk People's Republic, and 14, sorry, is that 40? I think it's 14%.
50, I think
24%, is it something like that? 54%.
I think it's 54%.
I better. I'm going to go with you, Ali. You've got your glasses on.
Yeah.
The Donetsk People's Republic. So I mean, there's still quite a bit of territory it wants to take. It's not, it's not even just going to accept the self-declared bits that have effectively been out of Kyiv's control for the best part of 8 years. It wants more. It wants a bigger slice of the cake.
Well, look, ultimately, Sean, at some point, both sides are going to have to sit down, however much they detest each other, and come to a negotiated settlement upon this. This is what's eventually going to happen. Now, the question is how many more innocent people have to die in the pursuit of this war for that to happen? And what does the peace look like? Zelensky has already been calling to join the EU and for that to be accelerated as quickly as possible. How is the EU going to respond to that? The NATO issue itself, which was back in 2007 when Putin had said that would be really beyond the pale for him to accept. And then in 2008, when George W. Bush had said in Bucharest that both Ukraine and Georgia should be part of NATO, and that carrot was dangled and never delivered, really left Ukraine in the worst of all worlds. It was neither part of NATO, nor was it clear that it was never going to be part of NATO. So Zelensky was still expecting there to be no-fly zones. He's sort of been left hung out to dry on that point. So the question is, what does this peace look like? What happens? Is the price going to be him signing a treaty saying thou shalt never join NATO? And my point really is, if that's where this ends up, it's why wasn't this done before? Why has it had to take so many hundreds of thousands of people to die in the pursuit of this war for us to end up in a position where Putin could have been satisfied anyway? Look, I may be wrong. Maybe Putin did want to take the whole country and topple Zelensky. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But the point is, at some stage, you're going to have to sit down, and the longer this goes on, the more innocents are going to die in the process.
Emma, take us to the front of the Daily Mirror. Let's move on to domestic news, as it were. Although you could argue whether it's domestic news, since apparently the definition of maritime definition seems to be we're all international when it comes to being paid. Certainly anyone who sails. Sling your hook. It's a great headline on the Daily Mirror. But I mean, even Peter Hepplethwaite admits that the brand of P&O has not come out well out of the last week and a half.
And even he admits that what he did was completely illegal. Yeah. So tonight we're hearing that the Prime Minister is supporting the calls for this. We call them embattled chief of P&O, Peter Hepplethwaite, to resign. He's admitted that he knew that the cull of his 800 staff last week was illegal. And as Ali pointed out in the last hour, he also took plenty of our furlough cash over the last couple of years for his workers. So apparently the Prime Minister, as well as Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, think that he should go. Sling his hook.
There's a real problem, Ali, with this, isn't there? Because presumably, if this decision stands, if, as Mr Hepplethwaite was telling MPs when he addressed that joint committee hearing earlier in the week, we're going to compensate for the staff. In other words, we're going to bung them some money to make up for the fact that we sacked them in a way that was illegal, and that therefore the whole thing will go away. There will be other companies who will say, hang on a minute, A, maybe we should do the same, but also B, isn't it kind of, aren't they undercutting their rivals if they get away with this? I mean, if it is such a tight industry where margins are so tight, if you were another ferry operator, you might feel that this should be something government should stop.
Well, indeed, but look, the law is the law, and the law seems to have been broken. This is what the CEO of P&O himself is saying, and in an environment, right, where you cannot move for talk of ESG, environmental, social, governmental rules around companies these days. This is all a fad, the vogue now. You would have thought that social issues, i.e. dealing with your workforce in a humane, decent manner, would be close to the top of the list of priorities you would have. And perception-wise, all companies agonize about reputational risk. This is the worst PR disaster for P&O. They have fired their workers. They want to pay £5.50 an hour to people who travel between ports that are not within the UK, and they can get away with this. And also, they've got a massive issue with ships that they've got a big deficit to their a big loan that they owe to their pension fund. And even the ships, apparently, that they've given as collateral for that are secured on that, are worth a lot less than they claim to be. So there are many issues around this to be dealt with, and it looks really, really poor.
The only thing that perhaps Peter Hepplethwaite can console himself with this weekend, if he's watching, is that you didn't do a Rackman, Mr. Hepplethwaite. You haven't actually trashed your brand by saying it's crap. So, to use the phrase that I quote him, well, not a phrase I would normally use even at this time of night, but that's a direct quote from Mr. Rackman, who Ratner, what am I saying? Rackman, that's a very different person. Gerald Ratner, in the old days of his jewellery firm. So he hasn't done that. So, I mean, it could be worse for him. But as you say, the political pressure. And now, so we're going to come out to PR disasters a little later. But first of all, Ali, PM claims Sunak snubbed his plan for energy. This is a case of the Prime Minister sort of getting the benefit of having a Chancellor who's kind of dealing with some of the financial consequences of COVID and the economic slowdown, all the rest of it, but trying to let people know it's a sort of bit of a dog whistle, isn't it? It's not my fault, it's him. You want to blame the man in number 11, it's not me.
Well, there are always tensions between chancellors and prime ministers, because the prime minister, in this particular case, wants to splash the cash, and the chancellor's the one who's got to find a way of paying for all of this. Look, we've got 400 billion borrowing on the back of COVID. We've got 2 trillion of public debt. Interest rates are going up. Sunak's very, very nervous about when he runs sensitivity analysis on his debt, that a 1% increase in interest rates could lead to 20 billion extra on servicing that debt. Now, the problem here is the Prime Minister wants, what this is saying is the Prime Minister wanted the price cap on energy bills that's going to be reviewed in October to again be capped and not increase when Ofgem look at that again, right? To give households certainty that their bills wouldn't be rising. You can see that the French have capped energy costs, the Italians issued subsidies. But the bottom line is, Sunak is a chancellor who's got a really tough set of choices to make. There are only two ways the government can raise money: either tax you more or borrow more. Borrowing he doesn't want to do anymore because interest rates are going up. Taxes, well, we'll have a discussion about that the next election. I mean, the reality is, if the Labour Party or another party want to stand on massively increasing the tax take, they can do that. There's an election process. It's called the democracy.
Done it already, according to organisations like the Institute for Fiscal Studies.
He has already on national insurance, and what it meant, Sean, on the fact that he's raised the national insurance threshold, and what it means is there's going to be 6 billion less going into the health service to meet the 6 billion waiting list backlog. You've got no free choice here.
Emma.
Well, perhaps he shouldn't have allowed billions and billions of COVID cash to be fraudulently claimed then, if he's so desperate for money and can't help struggling households. Yeah, I think it's a very convenient leap for the Prime Minister because he can look angelic. He can look as though he desperately wanted to help these struggling families, but he wasn't allowed to by the Chancellor. And it also does further damage to Rishi Sunak's reputation. And obviously he wants Boris Johnson's job. So I thought this was a very amusing story from The Telegraph. And interesting that it's The Telegraph, as you pointed out in the last hour, Sean. I wonder how they got this story. Were there some phone calls from Boris's friends?
Oh, well, with friends like this, as they say. Seriously, though, the Guardian front page, Emma, rain on the Royal Parade. I mean, it's it's a lovely, I have to say, it's a lovely photo. It's a brilliant photo because, I mean, you know, Caribbean rain passes pretty quickly. Is the great joy of it's heavy, but it passes. And we've had a smashing week in this country. Poor old them. They get the showers when they go. They left the showers and they're still getting the showers. But it does seem that some of these things could have been avoided.
Yeah, overall, it's being billed as a sort of tone-deaf tour of the Caribbean, that it was, royal. People are calling there a sort of series of PR blunders, royal tour disaster. Several of the papers talk of the disasters. Things like the royal couple being photographed. The optics were not good. Being photographed, shaking hands with children through this wire mesh fence, even though apparently the children were watching a football match. The very embarrassing and sort of frosty reception that they got, or the embarrassing reception they got from the Jamaican premier. And to me, I was saying before, to me, the timing felt very off. I know that these royal tours are planned, months and months in advance, and they have to be. But I think that the timing with what's happening in Ukraine just seemed extremely strange, with all the photographs of the lavish and luxurious ceremonies that they were prancing around the Caribbean taking on. But it's a difficult time for the monarchy, and it's obviously a time of transition.
Ali?
I think that's right. I think Emma's right. I think it's a time of transition, both domestically within the UK and also internationally. It is the Queen's Platinum Jubilee year, and she knows that at some stage she's going to have to pass over the reins, and she's already increasingly doing that. Now, Prince Charles also knows that even in this country, support for the monarchy, particularly amongst younger members of the public, is a lot lower. There's less deference around. So the monarchy needs to continuously reinvent itself to remain relevant. And on the international stage, you could see that there are going to be problems with countries like Jamaica who want to move on, and that's their perfect right to do so. But I do still think that there are institutions like the Commonwealth where a lot of value can be added. I do think that there's a lot of affection that is held for the royal family. You could see that in some of the pictures even this week on that tour. So I don't think it's all bad, but I do think the PR people should have done a better job, because they should be thinking about every single potential photo op that could happen. And I think they let them down a little bit in certain areas here.
Emma, let's end on the Sun to the Sun with the wonderful headline, Wayne Clooney. Tell us about that.
So apparently Wayne Clooney, sorry, George Clooney, you're getting me confused now, Sean. George Clooney wants to buy Wayne Rooney. No, he doesn't. George Clooney wants to buy the struggling championship side run by Wayne Rooney, Derby County. If the football world could get any madder than tonight it just did, I mean, why doesn't he buy Chelsea with
I was going to say, he's probably got the money, let's be honest.
I don't think he's got the money.
Anyway, so yeah, there we go. That's about as much as I can say about that. George Clooney wants to buy Derby County.
Would that make you, Emma, more likely to go and watch a Derby County match?
I'm a Liverpool fan. I don't need to worry about any of this. I don't need to worry about
George Clooney or no George Clooney. Emma, thank you. It's your debut with us. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to have you. Have you enjoyed it? Will you come again?
Of course I will. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Ali, I hope you'll come again. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Brilliant. Thank you both very much. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you very much for your company. It's always a pleasure for me to know that you're there. It's also quite reassuring. No, I'm not talking to myself. I do that enough at home. Paper's back again tomorrow evening. Joining James will be with James Rampton, features writer at The Independent, and Anne McElvoy. Forgive me, I shouldn't say that. I've known Anne long enough. Anne McElvoy, who's senior editor at The Economist. Do join us then.